At exactly 2:17 a.m., a smartphone connected to a cell tower in the Arizona desert. 40 seconds later, the signal vanished. The call did not end. The battery did not die. The phone did not power down. It simply stopped existing on every network at once. By the time investigators realized how important that moment was, the desert had already swallowed the evidence. In early January 2025, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office received a missing person report that seemed unremarkable. 29-year-old Evan Miller had not returned home after a short overnight drive. He lived alone, worked as a systems engineer, and rarely deviated from routine. According to friends and family, Evan was cautious to the point of being boring. He avoided risks, kept his car meticulously maintained, and never drove off-route without a reason. That night, Evan left Phoenix just after 11 p.m. He was heading north toward Payson to visit a friend he had known since college. The drive was familiar, the weather was clear, and traffic reports showed no accidents or closures. Text messages sent earlier that evening revealed nothing unusual. Evan joked about stopping for coffee and promised to be back by morning. He never arrived. When Evan failed to respond to calls or messages by sunrise, his sister contacted the police. Officers located his vehicle less than 10 hours later on the shoulder of State Route 87. It was parked neatly, parallel to the road, as if Evan had simply pulled over for a break. The engine was cold, the fuel tank was half full. There were no skid marks, no broken glass, no signs of a struggle. Inside the car, everything looked normal. Evan's wallet was in the center console. His jacket lay folded on the passenger seat. There was no blood, no damage, no evidence that anyone else had been inside the vehicle. His phone was missing. Investigators initially classified the case as a voluntary disappearance. Adults are allowed to leave, they reasoned. People sometimes walk away from their lives. Without evidence of violence, there was little justification to escalate the case. Flyers were printed, a brief alert circulated among local departments, and then, quietly, the file began to gather dust. Until February 2nd. That morning, another family called to report a missing loved one. Daniel Reyes, 34, a freelance photographer, had vanished after a late-night drive along a nearby highway. Daniel was known for working odd hours and traveling alone, often chasing night shots of desert landscapes. At first, his disappearance seemed unrelated, but when his car was found, investigators felt a familiar chill. Daniel's vehicle was parked in the same manner, clean, undamaged, locked, abandoned, and once again, the phone was gone. This time, however, investigators uncovered something Evan's case did not have: data. Daniel's phone had been synced to a cloud account. While combing through backups, technicians discovered a short audio file. It had never been sent, never labeled, never intentionally recorded. The file lasted only 11 seconds. At first, it sounded like static. Then the breathing became clear, fast, controlled, too controlled. Wind scraped across the microphone, and footsteps crunched against gravel or sand. Then a whisper. "He's standing there. I can't see him." The recording ended abruptly, as if the phone had been torn away or shut down mid-sentence. 3 weeks later, a third person disappeared. By the end of February 2025, investigators could no longer deny the pattern. 3 adults, all driving alone, all disappearing after midnight, all last tracked in isolated desert areas far from towns, businesses, or reliable cell coverage. And in every case, their vehicles were recovered intact, positioned deliberately, almost respectfully. Still, without a body, the cases remained classified as missing persons. That changed in March. 2 hikers strayed off a marked trail while exploring a remote section of desert land nearly 15 miles from the nearest paved road. They noticed what they believed were animal remains partially buried by shifting sand. When deputies arrived, it became clear that the remains were human. The desert had done what it always does. Time and heat had stripped away details, but forensic examination revealed something deeply unsettling. The man had not died quickly. He had suffered dehydration, exposure, and blunt force trauma. More importantly, the location where his body was found did not match the place where he likely had been held. The victim was identified as Daniel Reyes. With that confirmation, everything changed. The investigation shifted from missing persons to homicide. Federal agencies were quietly notified, resources expanded, and for the first time, investigators began asking the question they had avoided since January. What if these people weren't lost? What if they were taken? Digital forensic teams reconstructed the victim's final days using every available source: vehicle GPS systems, app histories, deleted navigation searches, and cloud backups. The result was chilling. All three victims had searched for the same location in the weeks before they disappeared. It was not a business, not a landmark, not even a recognized destination. It was simply a pin dropped near an unmarked turnoff branching off the highway. No signs, no lights, no services. A place most drivers would pass without ever noticing. None of the victims ever arrived there. Traffic cameras should have captured something: headlights slowing, doors opening, movement near the road. But during the exact windows of each disappearance, the cameras experienced unexplained failures, power interruptions, corrupted data, scheduled maintenance that, on paper, explained everything. To investigators, it explained nothing. One detective later admitted off the record that it felt as though someone knew exactly where the system couldn't see, as if the blind spots weren't accidents, but invitations. In April 2025, the first visual evidence emerged. A distant traffic camera, positioned miles from the disappearance zone, captured a low-resolution fragment just after 2 a.m. The image was grainy, distorted by heat shimmer and distance, but what it showed was unmistakable. Evan's car slowed, brake lights flared red against the darkness, and near the edge of the road stood a figure, a human silhouette. The figure did not wave, did not step forward, did not move at all. It simply stood there, close enough to force a decision. No facial features could be identified, no clothing details confirmed, just a shape that did not belong in a place where no one should be standing, especially at that hour. As the investigation expanded, the FBI joined local authorities. Behavioral analysts began building a profile. Engineers examined cellular interference logs. On paper, the infrastructure was sound. Towers were functioning normally. There was no legitimate reason for phones to vanish the way they did. And yet, in every case, the signal disappeared in the same dead zone. By May, public warnings were issued. Drivers were urged not to stop for strangers, not to follow unfamiliar navigation prompts, and not to travel alone at night through certain routes. Media coverage intensified. Online forums filled with speculation. Some believed the disappearances were the work of a single predator. Others suggested something more organized. Then, on May 28th, a fourth person disappeared. The pattern repeated with terrifying precision. A late-night drive, a silent stretch of highway, a vehicle found intact, a missing phone. This time, however, investigators uncovered something Evan's case did not have: footprints. Fresh impressions in the sand leading away from the road. They continued for several yards and then stopped. There were no return tracks, no tire marks nearby. It was as if the person had stepped into another vehicle or had been taken without resistance. As of today, 2 individuals remain missing. No arrests have been made, no suspects had been publicly named. Authorities refuse to comment on whether they believe the perpetrator is acting alone. The desert remains silent. But investigators agree on one thing: phones do not simply vanish, signals do not simply disappear, and people do not walk into the Arizona night unless something or someone is waiting for them. The last signal still echoes through the case, and whatever caused it has not stopped.